Hey, gang, this week's episode is brought to you by oldschoolshirts.com. Hey, check them out. You like defunct teams and leagues and t-shirt form? Well, you'll find them there, but a whole bunch of other stuff, too. Do you remember a radio station of the past or perhaps a mall that you used to go to? All kinds of great cultural and sports memories can be found at the great folks at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases. And now, here's our show.
Welcome you to Toyota Field in San Antonio. It is the 2022 USL Championship Final.
We've been relentless in our preparation.
It's about keeping a steady head and just business as usual.
At the end of the day, it's going to come down to critical moments. It's been a long journey to get to this point.
I ask that you give it all tonight. Our boys need it tonight. Tonight, our boys will bring home a championship!
The USL Championship Final is underway in 2022. Coutinho! He scores! Finally, he has his goal! For Louisville City. San Antonio FC finishes the fight. The long-awaited star, San Antonio FC, wins the USL Championship Final.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
My goodness, can you believe it? A new year already. Happy 2024 everybody, he says. And hope your new year is already off to a great start in the wee hours of January the 1st as we drop this episode. How are you? My name is Tim Hanlon, and you have survived another turning of the calendar page to enjoy, hopefully, another fun session of Good Seats Still Available. Our little weekly sojourn into what used to be in professional sports. I am pleased to have you back to the proceedings, and let's get the year off to a fun and surprising start with a wonderful conversation with a great soccer pro from the 70s and 80s. His name is Derek Currie, and it's our excuse to get into it's a fascinating story about soccer, growing up in Scotland and playing there and helping domicile the pro game in Hong Kong, of all places. We get some fascinating stories there. But also our excuse, as you saw in the labeling of this show, to talk about an oft-forgotten team in the soccer annals of United States history. The San Antonio Thunder. You remember them? Probably not. Even the most die-hard soccer aficionados don't even remember that team. But here's our excuse to do so. Derek played on that team in 1976. They were a 2-year wonder in the North American Soccer League at that time, playing in 1975 as well as 76. Bobby Moore, remember that name? Legendary English player was on that team, as was our conversationalist this week, Derek Currie. We get into how the hell that even happened. Here's a guy who grew up and played in the professional ranks at the top tier level in Scotland and found himself in 1980 after a handful of years at the top league in the pro leagues in Scotland, in Hong Kong, of all places, helping start up with a bunch of his Scottish football colleagues the first ever pro league in Hong Kong. Really interesting stuff there. And you can imagine as startup leagues might go, the various international stars and teams that came calling and visiting. Pele, for example, with Santos. The New York Cosmos, Sans Pele in the later part of the decade came by. And, again, this is really interesting because this sounds a little familiar. If you're an MLS fan, you'll know that Lionel Messi and Inter Miami will be visiting Hong Kong on their preseason tour next month. Hard to believe, but history may not repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme. Well, Derek Currie did that and has done that before. And we get into some very interesting stories and anecdotes about sort of those international visits and that kind of stuff. But the San Antonio Thunder part of this story is really, really interesting. And we get into sort of how going from Scotland to Hong Kong and then going from Hong Kong on loan to play a summer in the United States for this, I would argue, not necessarily huge hotbed of soccer at that time in the mid-'70s, San Antonio and Texas generally. But as you heard in that clip from 2022, San Antonio FC, very alive and well, thank you very much, playing at Toyota Field there in San Antonio, winning the USL Championship that season. And I think in 1976, I'm sure Derek and his colleagues probably thought, what are we doing here? Why are we here in San Antonio? How many people are really even interested in this sport here? But sure enough, like a lot of things, a lot of cities and a lot of early professional exploits. I mean, you remember the Atlanta Chiefs back in the late 60s, early 1970s in the NASL. I think most people, and then the return of the Chiefs in the latter part of the 70s in 1980. If you had followed the Chiefs back then, small and hearty bunch of fans, and I don't think many would have thought that, 40 some odd years after that the Atlanta MLS franchise would be one of the most strongly supported and heavily attended teams in MLS history, let alone winning a championship. But there you go. And San Antonio, no different. If you remember the San Antonio Scorpions of the second version of the NASL in the last decade, 2012 to 2015, they won in 2012 the North American Supporters Trophy. That means they were the best team in the regular season, and they won the Soccer Bowl championship in 2014 as well. So without the exploits, and we'll talk about those interesting days in 1976 in particular with Derek coming up. Without those early days in San Antonio pro soccer history, you wouldn't have San Antonio FC nor the San Antonio Scorpions championship exploits either. And I would dare to say that San Antonio has always been at least around the fringes in the conversation about a potential expansion franchise in MLS, perhaps a little harder to justify with Austin's existence now, but certainly a very strong and well-supported USL franchise there. And that's all sort of enveloped in the conversation coming up with the great Derek Currie as we talk about soccer in Hong Kong, in Scotland, in San Antonio, and all kinds of other things. It's a tremendously interesting conversation, and you will enjoy it, hopefully as much as I had in putting it together. Let's remind you that the book you should get is just chock full of great stories, not just the ones we're going to kind of traverse today. It's called When Jesus Came to Hong Kong, the remarkable story of the first European football star in Asia. And when you see the cover and you see the pictures in the book, you will understand why the term Jesus is in the title. A remarkable look, shall we say, that Derek had back in the day. And he was a pretty darn good soccer player as well. I don't know if he could walk on water, but indeed, the stories are plentiful, and you will enjoy this read if you are a soccer fan or just interested in the culture back in the day in the 70s and early 1980s, both in Asia as well as in the footballing world generally. Again, it's called When Jesus Came to Hong Kong, and you can find a convenient link to this book and get it as fast as humanly possible through our friends at Amazon. When you go to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, just search up this episode with Derek, which is numbered 331, my goodness, and you will find a few convenient links to get said book in your hot little hands as quickly as they and we can get it to you. All right, let's waste no more time. Here is our fun chat that we had with Derek about a month and a half ago. I thoroughly hope you are interested and enjoy this conversation. As always, of course, please sit back and enjoy. So give us a little bit of a sense of the young Derek Currie, as you're in Scotland. Put us back in the time. When is this, and when do you start playing football in earnest?
Okay. I suppose you could say I started playing football in earnest as soon as I could walk, as daft as that may sound. But I grew up in a sporting family. My dad was a very, very good footballer himself, and he worked in John Brown Shipyard, built many of the great ships, the Queen Elizabeth, Queen of Mary. Well, he was involved in building them. But he had a family to look after, so he couldn't pursue his football career. I should have said soccer career. We'll use soccer from now on, okay?
Hey,
Anyway.
we're purists, but whatever floats your boat is fine by us.
Yeah, okay. Well, I might flirt between football and soccer, so bear with me. Anyway, my dad had a family to look after, so he couldn't pursue his soccer dream. He had a chance maybe to go down to England, play football, but he had a young family to look after. I had two older brothers who were a good bit older than me, but almost 10 years. And the middle one, John, played for Glasgow Rangers and for about 4 seasons. And the older one was called Dick. And Dick was a big star as I was growing up because he was a boxer. And boxing was very popular in Scotland, as it was in many parts of the world. And Dick was ABA champion in 1953-54. He was the first Scotsman to successfully defend his Amateur Boxing Association title down in England at Wembley Pool in flyweight division. And then, of course, he went to Vancouver and won the gold. He won the Commonwealth gold medal in 1954 at flyweight in Vancouver. So it was a bit of a legend in Scotland at the time. Everybody knew him. And then he went on to become the chief boxing reporter for one of Scotland's biggest newspapers. And everybody knew Dick. And I mention this is because everybody knew him. I used to meet famous people. I used to go out with Dick and he'd bump into the top football players of the day in Scotland, and they knew Dick, so I get introduced. So I was always there with the excitement of meeting famous players, and they used to take me, Dick and John, my father, used to take me to football games to watch when I was maybe 5, 6 years of age. So I get involved in football at an early age and learnt a lot of things, and a lot of tips from my father and my brother gave me. And I ended up playing for some of the top amateur teams in Scotland at that time. Glasgow United. I played with a team called Cumbernauld United when I was 18 at the time. And there was a young guy who was in the forward line with me. He was 16. And he used to joke and say that I used to babysit him. And that young boy became one of the greatest football players of all time in Scotland, Kenny Dalglish, now called Sir Kenny Dalglish.
Sure.
Great career with Liverpool, managed Liverpool, initially with Celtic. And Kenny and I still chat from time to time. So I was very fortunate because of my sporting family to get involved in football. And I knew I was always going to make it in football. I knew I would be able to make my name sometime. I just had that, I don't know, I had a bit of confidence. Maybe it was because my encouragement from my brother, sporting family. I just felt I would make it somewhere. Anyway, my dad said to me, look, son, you can't go professional early. You have to get something behind you. You need a job. One bad injury and your career's ruined. One bad tackle, you're finished. So reluctantly, I got a job for 5 years as a compositor, which is a makeup type. You make up the typeface for the printers. And it was a good job in its time, but for me it was 5 wasted years. But it was 5 years I had to do. I had to get involved and have something behind me, as my dad had quite rightly said. So that was me. And that takes us up.
Derek, this is in Glasgow or
This is in Glasgow. This is in Glasgow in Scotland. This is all in Scotland, yeah, Glasgow, yes.
Sure, and very industrial. That's not a surprising choice for.
Oh, it was industrial city, very industrial. And but of course the big mecca for sports fans in Glasgow was either going to watch Glasgow Rangers or Glasgow Celtic. Football was just a religion in Scotland. Everybody looked forward to the weekend and the games where they used to get, some Cup finals, you'd get 80, 90, 100,000. They were fanatics, but we're going back to the times when we didn't have all the smartphones and computers, etc.
So in those derbies and stuff, I'm sure it was just you were just itching to get back onto the pitch and actually prove your skills. When did you make the jump? And how did you get into getting into third lineup and Motherwell in the Premier League, or what is now the Premier League? What happened was one of the things in Wiki. I never actually played with third lineup. I think Wikipedia'd something that they got that wrong. But anyway, sidetracking that, what happened was I ended up. I was asked to sign for Motherwell Football Club, and Motherwell were in the Scottish First Division. And I played a trial on the Saturday against Glasgow Rangers, and I had a good game. And the fullback, who I knew, Alec Miller, said to me, "Derek, don't do anything till the boss talks to you. Don't sign for Motherwell." Okay, so on the Monday night, I played another trial against Glasgow Celtic, the two big teams in Scotland. We lost the game 3-2, had a good game. And Rangers were interested in signing me, but my middle brother John had played with Rangers, and unless you're a full-time player, you never really make it. One thing is you've got to be full-time, and the fitness is a big difference. So I said I'll take my chance with Motherwell. Played with Motherwell, but I was still in the last year of my apprenticeship. I was only training twice a week, and I thought I was fit. You think you're fit when you're young. But I remember playing a game against Glasgow Rangers, and I realised I wasn't as fit as what I should be. And I knew I had to be full-time. So what happens is, out of the blue, Hong Kong are looking for professional players. Hong Kong is in infancy. I mean, in Japan and Korea, the leagues hadn't even started. And I said, I'll go along and play this game and have a trial. So I went along and played the game at Douglas Park, home of Hamilton Academical. And I said there was scouts there. I said, I've just finished my apprenticeship, so I can think about going full-time somewhere. Somebody might want to pick me up. Anyway, I'm on the field for 10 minutes, and I've taken off, and I've scored a goal with my head, which is uncharacteristic for me, being 5'9". But as it turned out, a lot of the hallmarks of my career was scoring with my head. Anyway, I played 10 minutes, I'm taking off. The manager comes and says to me, he was a Scotsman. He was over from Hong Kong. He was with a Chinese delegation. And he said, look, we think you'll be good enough to come to Hong Kong. And we think you would be a big asset, so we'd like to offer you terms. And I said to him, look, to be honest with you, I don't really think my future's in Hong Kong. But let me think about it. And then he hit me. He said to me, he hit me with a killer punch. He said, well, we think you'll be good enough to get into the Hong Kong League 11. And the Hong Kong League 11 in December are playing against Santos. So my ears started to twitch a little bit. Santos? He says, well, and Pele's coming. And he said, we think you'll be good enough to get into the team and play against Pele. And I said to him, where do I sign? Everything went out the window. And it really, I have to be honest with you, it must have started with the World Cup in 1970 in Mexico. For me, was the greatest World Cup final of all time. Pele, Testeo, Jarcino, you name the players. They were just electrifying. And here's an opportunity for me to go over and play against the greatest footballer in the world. And I had watched them live. I think it was in '66 before the World Cup was held in England. And they played a warm-up game against the Scottish national team. So there was only about another 12 or 14 Scotsmen who'd ever played against Pele. And I was at the game, standing, watching it. I was playing with Queen's Park at the time, whose home ground was Hampden Park. I was with another 90,000 people watching this game. Here's an opportunity for me to go and play and hopefully meet the greatest player in the world. So that was it. End of story. I set off for Hong Kong. The world of Susie Wong. It was an adventure. Didn't know what was going to happen, but it was an adventure. So this is 1970 or so?
This is September This is September 1970 now. And I am on my way to Hong Kong. And I land in Hong Kong. Fear. Stopped in Lebanon, stopped in Beirut, stopped in Bangkok. Never thinking that would eventually settle in Bangkok in Thailand. And I landed in Hong Kong, September 10, 1970. And the manager said to us, be prepared for a few journalists. They're going to ask you questions. And do your best to answer. Might be some odd questions, but do your best. So we get there and we come out into the open area and we couldn't believe it. As I said in the book, Pelé couldn't have pulled a bigger audience. There was journalists all over the place. So suddenly we were the main attraction. And the thing was, we were the first European professionals to play in Asia. Nowadays, as you well know, we have players from Japan, Korea playing in the best leagues in Europe. But at that time, we were the guinea pigs. So it was a lot on our shoulders. We never realised at the time, but that was the beginning of the adventure in the Far East, Tim.
Right. So give me a little bit of a sense of how this comes about, right? So it's fascinating to me because...
Okay, I'll tell you how it came about.
Yeah.
What happened was the guy who owned the team in Hong Kong had started a team called Hong Kong Rangers, named after a team he grew up in Govan where Rangers was situated. So he called his team Hong Kong Rangers. And the team the professional football had started a year, but there was no full-time professionals from Europe or anything like that playing. And his team had a bad season and they got relegated. There was 12 teams in the league. So they said, okay, what are we going to do? And he came up with an idea. I'll go back to Scotland and sign 3 good players. But first of all, there was a problem because he was relegated. So what he had to do was, he found out through the laws of the Hong Kong Football Association, the league could be extended to 14 teams. So what he did was, he put an application to extend it to 14 teams, but he had a lot of enemies and they didn't want him to succeed. The actual case went to the High Court in Hong Kong. The first time ever a case has ever been heard in the High Court in Hong Kong regarding football. Anyway, he was lucky. It was sustained, extended to 14 teams. So off he went to Scotland with his financial backers, Chan Yu Kum, Dr. Chu Bat York, who were landowners in Hong Kong. So they had the money behind them. And they were the people who went there and they had this trial game and they selected 3 players. Walter Gerrard, 6'1", great big fella, centre forward. Jackie Traynor, young boy, 17, skillful, midfield, big future ahead of him. And myself. So we were the 3 who went to Hong Kong to boost Hong Kong Rangers. And would we be successful? Well, time would tell.
All right, a couple of questions here. So number one, why Scotland? Like, why there versus, say, other countries?
Because he was from Glasgow himself. The manager, Ian Petrie, was from Glasgow. That was his town, and he knew there was players there. That's why he went to Glasgow.
Now, could you make the argument that perhaps he was thinking that, Scotland was kind of maybe a little bit more undiscovered, shall we say, in terms of talent, and he maybe had an inside line to it versus, say...
Well, it was well known. It was well known if you go back, if you look back in the history of football, some of the greatest individual players came from Scotland and they went and joined English clubs. So Scotland was a great, in Glasgow in particular, it was a great breeding ground for getting successful players. You go back and think of some of the names, Dennis Law, Sir Alex Ferguson and many more. They all came up. So Glasgow had good pedigree. So obviously, it was a wee bit in his heart going back to Glasgow, but it was very national. He knew what he was doing because there was lots of talent to be picked up in that area. Okay, and then describe to me what you just described. Obviously, the relatively bendable rules, shall we say, when it comes to the Premier League there. But I'm getting the sense that Hong Kong's professional soccer or football at the time the history was pretty scant. There really wasn't any pro league of any great sort there for any extended period. Yeah, but they had a good history. There was a lot of good teams, Asian football at that time. It went unnoticed, Tim. You got to remember there was no you didn't have any computer settings, so you didn't know. You knew scant about football in Asia at that time. And same as us, we didn't know what the standard would be like, but we soon found out. The standard was a bit twofold. The Chinese players, the local Hong Kong players, were extremely skillful because they used to play a lot of seven-a-side football in concrete fields, and they were good at knocking the ball. The skills were excellent. But the other side of the coin, it could be quite physical, as we found out. And we found out that the defenders really wanted to send us back to Scotland and crutches some of the games. I was fortunate because my speed was a big asset and it used to get me out of trouble. But we battled hard and we became successful in the first season. Walter Gerrard and I scored 30 goals each. We scored 60 goals between us. I got another 6 in another competition. And so we actually paved the way for Petrie, and we actually increased the gates. We added the interest in Hong Kong football to the fans, and a lot of the games you couldn't get a ticket at the stadium, which was 28,000 people. But the fascinating thing for me, Tim, was within almost 3 months of arriving in Hong Kong, right, the Hong Kong fans have christened me Jesus, which means Yeso in Chinese and Cantonese. I played against Pelé twice, and I'm in Vietnam during the war for a week playing in the football team, playing a football competition. Who would have believed within 3 months I'm called Jesus? Played against Pelé twice, and I'm in Vietnam. That was an adventure.
So, okay. So explain to me then, at the time, right, Hong Kong was still a British protectorate, correct? Okay. So that must have made the transition a little bit easier, right? Because English was fairly well entrenched there alongside, the Chinese culture and all that kind of stuff. But it was not nearly as, well, it was Chinese, if you will, but it was
cosmopolitan.
There you go.
It was really cosmopolitan, Hong Kong, 100%. But you couldn't move without a story about you in the newspaper. It was very insular in some aspects. I mean, everybody knew everybody from top to bottom, and it was just a great mix, Hong Kong. And a lot of the Hong Kong boys could speak English, some couldn't. But I mean, football's an international language, and that wasn't a problem. But it was just a great place. And I thought I was the luckiest boy in the world that actually took that transition to Hong Kong from Glasgow, because it took me away from a lot of the religious bigotry you got in Glasgow, and Hong Kong being cosmopolitan. You were just in a civilization, a place where everybody respected everybody and everybody got on well with one another.
How about the quality of play, both yours as well as that in the league? And were there other foreign players coming in as well?
Well, yeah, we were the catalyst, obviously, because we were so successful. Other teams quickly jumped on the bandwagon, and we won the league for Hong Kong Rangers in the first season. And that's a feat which they've never equalled again since. So yeah, we were the catalyst, and throughout the years they brought players, but a lot of them came out like George Best came over, and we'll talk about George Best a bit later. But Georgie came over, and Charlie George and Jeff, some other big names, but they never made it because they thought it would be easy, but it wasn't easy. You had to be fit. The Chinese boys were fit, and they can run all day as well. So it wasn't easy, and it became a very good standard, certainly in the 70s up to the early 80s as well.
So you didn't feel like you were missing anything by not...
No, I wasn't missing anything. I wasn't missing anything. I'm playing against Pelé. When I get my name Jesus, I'm playing against the Swedish League champions, Djurgårdens. We beat them 3-2, and I had a great game, and I get credit the next day in the papers, Chinese papers, that said, Yeso Dagal Hong Kong, which means Jesus saves Hong Kong. That's where I got my name. So suddenly, I'm on the pages and media. I'm getting cited for interviews and radio, television. and all sorts of things. And in Hong Kong in the 70s, early 70s, everybody came in Hong Kong. You never knew who you would bump into in the street. And I'm talking about famous movie stars and that. That was the great thing about Hong Kong. And I met there was a chap who worked for the Star newspaper, and he did the publicity page, movie showbiz. And often he would say to me, "Derek, are you free today?" And I would say, "Yeah, okay, what's happening?" He said, "It's a press conference we're going to attend." I said, "Who is it today?" He said, "For instance, the Carpenters." So I would go up to the Star newspaper office in Pennington Street, meet Terry. We'd go down to the Hilton, and there would be sitting with Richard and Karen Carpenter and getting a chance to have a chat with them afterwards. And I managed to meet so many people like that. The only one I'm really, really annoyed about was one day he said to me, "Gary, you'll need to get down and meet us today." I said, "Oh, I'm tight. We've just finished training. I don't know if I can get there." "Oh, you'll need to get and meet me at the office." I said, "Well, who's in town?" He said, "John Wayne." Now, I was a cowboy fanatic from an early age. I knew all the movies, the searches, you name it. But I get caught in a traffic jam that day, and I never managed to get to see my old hero in the TVs, on the screen, cinema screen, John Wayne. But yeah, you never knew who you were going to meet. So I was missing nothing. I would have to say, I'm not being conceited about it, but I was like what George Best at the time was to Manchester. I was what he was in Hong Kong, if you can understand what I'm saying.
No, I mean it's almost like you're you're sort of a king of a new world, so to speak, almost. You could never replicate that if after a decade in Europe,
I was a big fish in a small pond. Really, a big fish in a small pond. That's what it was. So it was up to me to keep playing well and scoring goals. And what the Chinese and local fans liked about me, particularly, was the games against opposition from Europe, particularly at Chinese New Year. I mean, I remember one game we played against Hamburg, and they had a great team, and we won the game 1-0, and I scored the goal, and fans just went crazy, and it gave me a great feeling, because what they had given to me, I was giving back to them in the football field and making them happy. And if you're a supporter of a team and you're playing against a big team and you beat them, you go home happy as a supporter. And that's what I love doing for the Hong Kong fans. And I remember after we played Hamburg, I was down in a quaint little place called Shekel, which has got a nice beach where William Holden and made that movie, Love Is a Many Splendid thing. And we were down training on the sand at Shekel about 2-3 weeks after this game. We'd beaten Hamburg. And I'm sitting there, and this old man, very old, spoke to our manager, and he started looking, gesticulating towards me. And the manager said to me, "Do you know what he said to me?" I said, "No, I have no idea, Ian." He said, "The day you played against Hamburg, the whole village was watching the game, and all the little ramshackle shops and everything." He said, "When you scored and won the game, everybody got drunk." And that, for me, that just made me put a lump in my throat. So that was an indication that I had given back to the Hong Kong fans, and that made me happy. And I had no intention of going back to Scotland or playing there. My home was in Hong Kong.
You also had plenty of visiting teams from other countries coming to play.
Yes.
Either preseason, exhibition, probably not international competition per se, though, right?
No, there wasn't international. It was all, we had tournaments at Chinese New Year over sort of February, late January, February, or the beginning of March, and that's when teams came, because it was a big holiday in Hong Kong, and that was the time when the teams came over to play.
Do you remember some of the teams that did come over, maybe on a fairly regular basis? And I mean, Santos, right, was.
Santos came. Santos came in 1970, and they came back in 72.
And they toured all the time, right? I mean, Pele.
Yeah, they toured because they had a lot. Although he wasn't making millions, he was still making a hefty bit of money in those days, Pelly. So they toured a lot in order to get money for the club, which they needed. And I remember they came back in 72, and we were at the Lee Gardens Hotel, which is Causeway Bay, if anybody knows Hong Kong. And going up the escalator was Pelly. And there was a press conference, and I came in at the same time, and I'm about a yard or two behind him. And Pelly turned around and saw me, and he said, "Number 11, how are you?" And I said, "That'll do me. He might not remember my name, but he remembers my number. That's a big thank you." We played against Sporting Lisbon. I think I probably got one of the best goals I'd ever scored. We beat them 4-2, and they got in the semi-final of the Cup Winners' Cup the year before. And let's not kid ourselves. These teams never came for a holiday. They came to show off their talent. So we beat some very, very good teams over the years.
Do you remember? So you played for Seiko for a number of years.
Yeah. What happened was I played for Hong Kong Rangers for 2 years, and then Seiko was the new kid in the town. They got an advertising budget about $1 million Hong Kong dollars, and the two brothers who owned the club decided, rather than spend money in TV advertising, they'd start a football club. And they did, and they were successful, and they got to the first division, and then they wanted to get the best players who were available in Hong Kong for the new season, 1972-73 season. And I was one of the players, and my manager didn't want to let me go, but eventually I managed to get free, and I joined Seiko, and they became probably one of the most successful clubs in Hong Kong history after that. So much so, we even played against it. We played against the we'll come to it later. We played against the Cosmos, I think, 79.
Okay, let's go there. I was going to wait till later, but so according to my crack research, September 20th, 1979. Do you remember that game?
Oh, very well. I'll tell you why I remember it very well. It was a wet old night, and they had 2 World Cup winners on their team. They had Beckenbauer in the team, and they had Carlos Alberto in the team. And they had a chap called Johan Neeskens, who was a great player. He was in the 74 team, lost to West Germany in the final. And they had some great players. And I actually said to a friend of mine, "I want you to do me a favour," because I was doing a little column for the Hong Kong Tatler magazine, and I said to a friend of mine, "I want you to do one thing. When the game finishes, when we come off the field, I want a picture of Franz Beckenbauer and the jerseys and the sweat and the mud all over us." Okay. Unfortunately, it was a wet old night, and when he went to push the film forward, they made a mistake and there was no picture. Which was a great disappointment, because it's nice getting a picture on the field with some of the greats that you grew up watching. Anyway, what happened that night? We all had a good night afterwards. And then the next morning, my wife gets up and she says, "Who's that lying on the couch?" I said, "He's a very famous football player. He's just tired." It was Johan Neeskens.
Johan Neeskens was sleeping on your couch. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, we went because the game never finished till about 10:30. So we went and had a couple of beers and nightcap and came back to my place. And but we were winning that game 3-2, and then Beckenbauer get pulled down in the last minute or something, and I think it was George Chinaglo who went up and took the penalty and ended up 3 each.
As Canalia always did. He always wanted to get those extra goals with the penalty kicks.
Yeah, he did. He did. And I've got some great mementos here. I've got a shirt here with the Cosmos, and when Carlos Alberto a number of years back was in Bangkok, we had a chat, and I showed him it, and he remembered the night, and he actually signed it for me. It wasn't his shirt, but I've got a lot of good memories with shirts I've exchanged with people, and of course the big one was you'll get to it, was 76 in San Antonio, which I still have.
All right, what's this? Oldschoolshirts.com. Fantastic. You've heard me talk on and on and on about the great folks and the great wares at oldschoolshirts.com. oldschools.com. Like the name implies, it's old school and it's shirts, and they put them together, into what they call oldschoolshirts.com. It's like the name implies, but of course we love them primarily for their sportswear. You name the league of the past, you name the team of the past, the chances are huge that they're going to have more than one shirt and different color schemes for things that you may remember from the United Football League or the Major Indoor Soccer League or various flavors of the original XFLs, plural, or the Federal League perhaps, or maybe World Team Tennis, or maybe it was the North American Soccer League, and on and on and on. But hey, it's not just sports. It's also great cultural touchstones and memories from the past. How about the officially licensed Evel Knievel connection? How about collection? Yeah, that's what he's trying to say. Various colleges. How about dead malls of the past? Ice cream parlors, maybe even radio stations that you might remember. Hey, even there's a latest edition of the now old, Aloha Stadium commemorative shirt. All that kind of stuff and more. You will find at least a handful of shirts that you will just transport you back into your past, and you will amaze and impress your friends at the same time. It's oldschoolshirts.com, and we got a promo code for you, of course. Let's save you some dough while you go there, and its promo code is Good Seats. Good Seats. That's the promo code at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code Good Seats for 10% off all of your purchases. Hey, P.F. Wilson and your friends at oldschoolshirts.com, thank you for your sponsorship of the show. And now, back to our conversation. I do want to get to the story of how one gets loaned to a team in the United States. How does that even come about? So tell me how.
Well,
were there other?
I'll tell you what.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you what happened, Tim. Jim Forrest was the assistant at San Antonio Thunder to Don Beatty, assistant coach, and Jim knew I was scoring a lot of goals in Hong Kong, and he wanted to take me there. And I was going through. I'd been married twice, but the first marriage we weren't compatible, and I was going through a little bit of a problem. So Jim lured me over to San Antonio with the option that if things didn't work out, I could go back to Seiko in Hong Kong, basically. So that was why I went to San Antonio in the first place. So
let's just back up for a second. So this is 1976. Is the NAS, first of all, what did you know about the United States in terms of soccer? Did you know much about the North American Soccer League? I suspect that you knew that Pelé had signed for the Cosmos in 1975, a little bit, but you probably didn't know a whole lot. Maybe you didn't even know where San Antonio, Texas was for God.
Oh, I knew. Listen, I knew where San Antonio was. Remember the Alamo, Sam Houston? You got to remember, I was a big Western buff, so I knew all about San Antonio. I knew all about the States, and anyway, yeah. It was an adventure. It was a change for me, so that's why I went off. And of course, the nice thing was knowing that the Cosmos were coming to play the last exhibition game before the bicentennial season began against the San Antonio Thunder. I remember that night very well. They're playing the Yellow Rose of Texas. As we're going onto the field, there's Bobby Moore leading the San Antonio Thunder onto the field, Pelé leading the Cosmos. And there's me about 2 or 3 behind Bobby Moore. I remember just looking up to the sky and saying, "Dad, I hope you're watching," because my dad had died 2 years earlier, and he would have been very proud to see his son going on the field with Pelé and Bobby Moore. And we actually won the game 1-0. Not everybody can say that we're a winning team against Pelé, but once out of 5 times wasn't too bad.
So, okay, what was the whole arrangement set up to be a loan, or was this a full-on transfer and you were going from Seiko?
Well, it was a case of see how things work out. I had the option, right, to go back to Hong Kong, and things never worked out. And as I've described in my book, my style of play was not suited to the way Bobby Moore wanted the team to play. He wanted me to come back as an orthodox winger and pick up the ball in defensive, whereas all I wanted to do was be up front in the action, scoring goals, putting the ball in the back of the net. So it never really worked. And there were so many players coming over, well-known players from Scotland and England as well. So the roster of the team was only, I think it was 18 or something. You had the X amount of American players in the team as well. So I ended up, I was sitting there like the super sub, and eventually we just came to agreement, and I went back to Hong Kong. But I had about 3 months and a bit over there, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, going to the places, seeing the stadiums. But I will say one thing about the development of the game. One of the problems, as I saw in 76, was the standard of the playing fields. I would have to say they were pretty awful. And I remember the second game we played, and the ground was I think it was a campus or something, and it was in just in a shocking state. They didn't even have proper changing rooms, and this was in San Diego, and the fields were not good. The places we went, obviously, all that's changed as American football, the NASL's progressed. But at the time, the football stadiums and the playing surfaces were very, very substandard, Tim.
Oh, for sure, right? So, there's a very famous story in 1975 when Pelé played his first match for Cosmos. It was a hastily arranged exhibition on national television in the States, and they played it at a stadium that the Cosmos were playing in at the time, which was sort of this rickety old war, time facility in between Manhattan and Queens on a place Randall's Island in New York City, and half the field was dirt that was painted green. It was.
I can imagine it, because I remember the San Diego Stadium, and it wasn't any better, I can assure you.
Well, okay, so describe that for me, because San Antonio, first of all, I think just for history here, you came into this San Antonio Thunder franchise in its second and last year when it was in San Antonio.
before they went to Hawaii, yes.
Right, and it was a team that was kind of traveling. This was classic NASL, where a team would play for 2 years and change its name and get different owners and all that kind of stuff. But let's put it this way: soccer was barely on the radar in the United States, let alone deep in the heart of Texas, right?
Well, in Texas, I think they had a big Mexican community. And of course, the Mexicans love the football. So I think that was the reason they chose Texas, and Wardley was from Boston. He was from Dallas himself.
Sure, but
so that was the ID angle.
No, I'm sorry, but then to populate it with a whole bunch of Scottish players and the national team captain of England seems like a bit of a mismatch.
Well, they had it. No, they had Jose Barrico. They had the Brazilian. They had a few sort of Latin American players in the team. It was a bit of a mixture as well, although it ended up being built around Bobby Moore, the England captain, as you said. But the first game in the Bicentennial. Well, okay, we played against in New York Cosmos, and I mentioned it in the book. And I remember in the halfway line, the ball bounced awkwardly as it would in not a great surface, and Pelé and I are going for the ball. And Pelé ends up on the ground, and I'm lying on top of him. And it looks like a sex act. But it's just the circumstances. It would have been a great picture if somebody had taken a snap me lying on top of Pelé. Anyway, as we both got up, the referee came and gave me a yellow card. And it was only an accident. And the way the ball bounced and we went down awkwardly. And Pelé said, no, accident. And I'm saying, but I want a yellow card, Pelé. I can tell Pelé I got a yellow card against Pelé. But no, the referee patted me in the head, accident, and that's the sportsman Pelé was anyway. And we sort of knew each other anyway, but he was a great guy. But the big game was against the St. Louis All-Stars, and it was the opening game, bicentennial season in the US. And funny enough, I was born in 1949, 8th of February, and I scored my goal in the 49th minute. So, I mean, it gets a wee bit, I can be a wee bit superstitious now and again, Tim, it's in the stars, who knows? And the funny thing about it was, St. Louis equalised in the game. And it was a long throw by a chap called Al Trost, T-R-O-S-T, who had 14 caps.
U.S. Soccer Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Hall of Fame, yeah, and he had 14 caps. And he threw a long ball in, and our keeper, it caught the wind. And our keeper didn't need to touch it because the goal would have been disallowed, but hit his hand and it went in. And here's the thing. I looked up all the Al Trost and that. And I know I got the first goal before him. Al was born on the 7th of February 1949. And I was born on the 8th of February 1949. And you just look at it and I say to myself, how scary is that? I mean, it's just amazing when you look at it. And it was the first goal in the bicentennial year. Fortunately, I got the winner, and I think it was the 83rd minute, and we won the game 2-1. But I've still got that jersey, number 11. Don Beatty kindly gave it to me when I left, so I've still got that jersey, which I'm sure should be in a museum someplace, certainly some USA museum.
Well, we will have a couple of pictures of that as we post this episode. Let me a couple other questions before we go. We leave the United States. I look at the roster of the 1976 San Antonio Thunder team.
Yeah,
and I count no fewer than 9, maybe 10 players of Scottish origin on that team.
Yeah, because I think they had a scout called Bobby Calder, and Jim Forrest was the assistant. He was meant to play games, but he got injured, Jim. And Jim Forrest sadly died about 3 weeks ago. He was a great player for Glasgow Rangers, scored many, many, many goals, went on to join Aberdeen. But Jim was a bit injury prone, and he ended up being the assistant to Don Beatty. And his influence was a guy, Bobby Calder, so he was a Scottish scout. So I think that's why he brought a lot of the Scottish players over to play for San Antonio.
Did you know that coming over that it was going to be kind of a?
No, I didn't. I didn't know that. It was just very fluid as it turned on. It's the way it went, and of course we brought over the big players and that, and of course that meant little Derek Currie from Hong Kong. We'll put him on the bench, and Bobby didn't like it. The way I played, he wanted me back picking the ball up, as I said. But no problem, because I fully understood that, and Bobby and I became great friends. So it's just the way a team plays. It's the way they have a system, how they want to play. And if you look at a lot of the games with the San Antonio Thunder, they lost so many games like 1-0 or 2-1 or very close encounters because defensively they were very good, and that suited Bobby. He was getting on in years as well. But they weren't scoring goals, and that's what wins games, Tim.
How about the play, the style of play, the rules, which were a little different, trying to make it Americanized, and the fans? Were they passionate? Not around? Did you different cities? Like which? Give me a little sort of taste of what your 3-4 month experience in the United States was like in terms of play and that kind of stuff.
Oh, it was good. I mean, it's like one other thing is it's like it was like a travel log. You were going all over America. You'd fly from San Antonio to Dallas. You go to San Diego. You go to Portland, Oregon. So you saw the different cities as well, and different types of play. Up in Portland, we're playing on it was AstroTurf.
It was rock hard AstroTurf too, right?
Well, yeah, I remember we were up and played a couple of friendly games up in Spokane and Tacoma, and one of the games was in an AstroTurf, but it wasn't a good AstroTurf surface. When the ball came to you and it bounced, if it didn't come to your feet and it bounced maybe half a yard in front of you, it went about 6 feet over your head. But these are the things you've got to put up with, and these are the things that happens in the early day soccer in the States. In the early days, and all that changed over the years. As we got on to, we'll talk a wee bit later about the USA national team, and I brought them to Hong Kong and how they progressed a little bit later.
All right, let me ask you this about the travel. The travel must have been completely new to you because such long distances and such short times to recover.
Yeah, but I didn't. When you're young, you get enthusiasm, you're excited, you're going to a different place. That didn't worry me. It didn't worry me. The only thing I remember was when we went up to, I think it was when we went up to Portland. And then we flew over to Tacoma somewhere in these little twin otter planes, That was a little bit scary if you were claustrophobia, suffered from claustrophobia, But 12 of you in one plane and 12 of you in another plane flying over the Cascade Mountains.
Yeah, it's a little unnerving if you don't know what you're in for.
Well, you don't. If you don't, you think you're going to go on a big plane, and suddenly a little turbo plop, and you're saying, "Oh, what's going on here?" But then again, when you're young, as I've always said, you're a bit fearless. Maybe you get a bit older, you think twice about it.
And what did you think about the rules? Was the shootout there at that time? There certainly was a point.
Yeah, they had the shootout. I remember we adopted it once. We adopted it once in Hong Kong in a League 11 game. And we were playing against it was a Yugoslavian team at the time, and we actually won the shootout. It was something different. It was something different because there was a bit of skill in it. You only had a few seconds from takeoff to put the ball past the goalkeeper. It wasn't easy. People might think it's easy, but it's a lot of pressure. And some say it was as good as the penalty shootout.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, and I'll get your thoughts in a few minutes about sort of like the state of soccer now. But I look at the penalty shootouts now, especially in the major, international competitions and stuff. And I don't know, the penalty is just. I look at the old 35-yard line NASL type shootout with 5 seconds to shoot. It feels a lot more exciting to me, a little bit more chance, and frankly, a little bit more skill on both sides of the ball versus just sort of, it feels more just like chance in a penalty kick scenario. I know there's
but it's still sudden. No matter what you do, it's still sudden death, and you've got that excitement. It is more skillful from the 35 yards, running there, and it's not easy because you've got to make up your mind what you're going to do. Are you going to run with the ball? And are you going to lob it over the goalkeeper's head? Are you going to go for pace? But then the other thing is, if you're playing in a ground which is not in good condition and it's a bit uneven, it's not easy when you go to make contact with that ball and it takes a bobble. So it's all very well the shootout on a good playing surface, but it's not easy on a bad surface.
No, which was probably every stadium you were playing in the NASL at that time, right?
Most of the time, yeah.
All right. So when did you sense that the Thunder thing wasn't going to work out? And did you?
When I went up to Portland, we lost the game 1-0, and of course they weren't scoring, and I knew, and I had words with Bobby and with Don Beatty, and Don Beatty just said, "Fine, Derek," and I was allowed to go back to Hong Kong, and that was it after the Portland. So I enjoyed it, but to be honest with you, Hong Kong was my home. Really, and I missed it. And
so
it was an adventure playing there.
You were homesick for your adopted home.
No, I wasn't. I wouldn't say I was. I wasn't say I was homesick, but I knew I was going back there, and I wasn't. I didn't like the role, and I wasn't getting the game time because I wasn't fitting into Bobby's system of how they wanted to play. I mean, I think Harry Hood was top goal scorer with but I think it was with 10 goals or something in 20 appearances. I'd scored 2 goals in a couple of appearances in the league. So I think if I'd stayed there and I'd been allowed to play my game, playing off a centre forward, my pace, I would have scored a lot of goals. But anyway, that's hypothetical. It didn't happen, and I went back. But it was a great experience, and it was nice to see the beginning, the birth of US football, which was maybe starting to go in the right direction. But I think the real thing about American football was it was homegrown players who made America the great team they are today. They went over in 1990 and they played the World Cup in Italy. And I was at one of the games when they lost 1-0 to Italy in Rome. And they weren't such a bad team. I think they lost 2-1 to Austria. And they did lose by 5-1, I think, to Czechoslovakia. But it was a learning curve for the US boys. And when Bora Milanovic took over for 94, it was a different team, and they had a good team. And when you want to talk about the players who were playing in 94, I had retired from the game, and I joined Carlsberg Big Beer Company as a PR manager. And of course, because of my face in Hong Kong, I was the face of Carlsberg, and I started the Carlsberg Cup Chinese New Year soccer tournament, and we brought club and international teams to Hong Kong at Chinese New Year. And in 94, we brought over the USA team. And this is only months away from the World Cup starting in the US. And in that team, they had people like Brad Friedel, Kobe Jones, Alexi Lamas, Corey Arena, Thomas Dooley, Joe Max Moore, Marcelo Balboa, Mike Burns, Jeff Agus. And if you look, for instance, in that team, say Jones, Mena, Balboa and Aguirre, they had about 530. They were going to have 537 caps for the US national team. So these were the boys who were the backbone and really got America off the mark in world football, and respected, I might add, in world football.
Oh yeah, legends, all of them. Yeah, for sure. I mean, on various levels. It's actually pretty amazing for you to hear all of that that knowledge of the U.S. soccer sort of journey, right? Because I mean, we're talking about you being there in 1976. That was, that was still a relatively early part of. I mean, it was still fledgling at the time. Obviously, the latter part of the 70s, the NASL, Cosmos in particular, and then, as you probably know, by 1985, the whole thing just went away. And soccer fans like me at the time, right, were almost, and frankly, some of those players that you mentioned who were growing up around that time and sort of idolizing some of those players around that time, almost felt abandoned. Actually, they did feel abandoned because there was no pro league all of a sudden, after that roaring start and those giant stadium crowds and stuff. All of a sudden, there was nothing for good until the World Cup again in '94.
Yeah, well, that was, the thing, it's all very well getting Pelé and George Best and Chinaglia and a few others, but they were all getting on. They weren't going to do anything for the game or encourage the youngsters. So it was American youngsters who had to take the bull by the horn and make a name for themselves and make America proud. The fans want to go and see their American team playing and winning games, and that's what they did. And, when they came in 94, they played against Denmark, and they drew 0-0, and they lost 4-2 in penalty kicks. And they lost to the Mania that year 2-1, who were actually in the same group as the US, if you remember, in the 94 World Cup. But they played well, and they had lots of good up and coming players, and of course Bora, the coach, was a great inspiration. I mean, he actually took he was the first man to take 5 teams to the World Cup finals, and he was very instrumental in getting the best out of the American boys and giving them the confidence. And of course, they had a great World Cup. We were unlucky some games, but they had a great World Cup in '94. And I covered the '94 World Cup. I actually covered 4 World Cups and 4 European Championships for media and television. And I was at the opening game at Soldier Field. The same stadium where I think Gene Tunney beat Jack Dempsey all those years ago, because I know about my boxing history.
Mr. Sports History, look at that.
And I remember the opening ceremony at Soldier Field. My God, it was you couldn't move inside the stadium. You had Diana Ross singing, and I think Oprah Winfrey was there. I remember she slipped off the stage. And I think the Chicago boy, Richard Marx, he sang the national anthem at that game. Remember it well.
That's that. Yeah. You look back at some of the video, that's a little gaudy, very, very American in all of its gaudiness, right? But that's what it was. We'll see if we can redeem ourselves in a few years when it finally comes back here. All right, let me give you a couple other roundup questions here. So you go back after your, let's call it an American adventure
Yes.
Got back to Hong Kong. It was Seiko, and then you decide that the Seiko watch isn't good enough, so you're going to go to Bulova for a year.
Yeah, well, that was the end of my career, because I was joining Carlsberg, so that meant I wasn't training full time. So that was just Bulova and Eastern, just tapering off my career basically.
But you were sent off though with some great fanfare at 82. You had a testimonial game in your
yeah, against Stuttgart. Yeah, that was good. Yeah, they gave me a nice silver salver after the game, which was lovely. Went round the stadium with all the fans. That was nice. It was I always felt a Hong Kong person, and it was a nice send off, Tim.
So you essentially are kind of, maybe still are, revered as sort of a local hero in Hong Kong, and as a professional player, I'm guessing. I mean, almost like a pioneer of the professional player, would you say?
Yeah, and in Hong Kong, it's like they know me. They know the name. If you say Yeso or Goyere, but if I was walking in the street, I wouldn't be immediately recognised with many of the younger generation. But if I got in a taxi, the old taxi drivers normally drive you and they look in the mirror and they say to you, "Ni hai Goyere, are you Currie?" And I'll go, "Oh, hi, I am." and they recognise, and then they want to have a chat and all that. So it's nice from that aspect. It's nice to be remembered, and that's the main thing. Especially, and I love the Hong Kong people as well, you know. And Hong Kong to me was, and still is, one of the greatest cities in the world.
So explain to me, your international career was for Hong Kong. You play for the national team of Hong Kong. Why not Scotland? And why Hong Kong? Where had you
I'd been away too long, and I was, out of sight over there. And
sure.
I played for and the thing is, I was playing for the Hong Kong League 11, and you had to be 7 years in Hong Kong before you were eligible to play for the national team. That was the rule. So by the time they decided that they were going to use foreign players, and that was 79, and we went and played in the Asian Cup game in Bangkok for the Hong Kong national team. And funnily enough, I got my first goal. We beat Sri Lanka 5-0 in a game, and I got my first goal with my head again. So that was nice, but it was a pity I had to wait 7 years, because my best years were obviously my early years in Hong Kong, but that was a game. So, and Scotland would have been nice, but I think that was a bridge too far, out of sight, out of mind. Scotland had a lot of players, good players over the years, and they weren't going to go over to Hong Kong and pick somebody from Hong Kong to go back and play a game for Scotland.
All right, a couple of roundup questions. Do you remember how many goals you scored in your professional career? Do you ever add them up?
Oh God, I would say close to 250.
Wow.
Yeah,
I bet you remember just about each one of them, though, right? Especially the ones.
No, I don't. I remember some of them.
At least the ones with your head, right?
I remember some. Yeah, at least my head I remember. Yeah, but not all of them. And did a lot of good things as well. Did a lot of charity work in Hong Kong. And remember I spent 20 hours on, I don't know how well you know Hong Kong or some of the attractions. One is called the Star Ferry, it's a ferry which goes between Hong Kong and Kowloon. I spent 20 hours on it one day, getting on and off and signing our name for charity. And we raised a lot of money for a children's home. And so, you did a lot of good charitable work as well, which was nice, giving something back to the community. And met a lot of interesting people, as you know in the book. There's a story about Marvin Hagler and Stevie Wonder, and that was a story and a half, I can tell you, Tim.
Well, give me a set, and obviously we want people to buy the book too, so we don't give all of this away just for free here on this little show. But tell me about Hong Kong since, right? Obviously it has been transitioned back to, if you will, Chinese mainland oversight. Obviously, it's a very.
It's been handed back, yeah.
Hong Kong, it's a fraught political. Yes. But when's the last time you were there? How often do you go back? And Do you think you could do the same today? Or I suspect that the environment is very different than when you played.
Yes, it's different. I was back this year, and I was back in end of March, April for the Hong Kong Rugby Sevens, and I went back there and I did some stuff, promotion for the book as well, and it was nice. It's always nice to get back there, and I try and get back to Hong Kong 2-3 times a year. And I remember I was a guest in the rugby union in the box, and there was a lot of dignitary there and former rugby players as well. And John Lee was there, the new CEO of Hong Kong as well, and I gave him a copy of the book actually. And then I just said, John, it's a very tough job, and I wish you well for the people of Hong Kong. And it's difficult circumstances from what it used to be, but as I said, I still think it's a great city, and I hope it prospers again. And football in Hong Kong, maybe it's not as good as what it was, because we're in a different age now, Tim, where I keep mentioning computers, all the apps. Really, for Hong Kong to be successful again, you need some homegrown superstars in Hong Kong. You get 2 or 3 homegrown superstars and they start to win games, then you'd suddenly see 25, 28,000, 30,000 people supporting Hong Kong at the stadium again. But you need the players to encourage the fans to come and watch.
Do you think it's tougher it's obviously much more difficult, I think, for Hong Kong to become or to stay as autonomous as it was under British control, right? In terms of being able to have that kind of soccer playing identity separate from whatever.
I don't think politics has got anything to do with the football in Hong Kong at the moment. I don't think the politics has got anything to do with it. I mean, football is an accepted sport, and there shouldn't be any politics in football, and there's no politics as far as I can see in Hong Kong football at the moment.
Interesting. So that means that there is a distinct sort of Hong Kong sort of association and play that's separate from.
The Hong Kong have got a coach. They've got they're playing in some Asian qualifiers and that, and they're getting some half decent results. And a lot of the athletes did well, I think, at the national games in China. They won quite a few gold medals, which was quite good. And they were all rewarded recently, which was nice to see. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping Hong Kong can prosper again, as most cities in Asia can, because I think I'm very much an Asian man, having spent over 50 years in Asia.
And let me let that be the segue to sort of my last sort of little bunch of questions here. And this really sort of is the state of play today. What is your sense of the professional game, both in Asia and worldwide, and obviously the money and the international ownership and multiple team ownership and tournaments left and right and center, and the players just playing all these games and never seeming to have a break and stuff. It's the best of times, but also arguably a little worrisome on some levels. How do you look?
The best of times and the worst of times.
Yeah, I mean, are you still a fan? Are you still hopeful? Do you think FIFA is running amok with 48 teams in the World Cup? I mean, what's your thought about the state of the game these days?
Oh, I think there's too much money in the game. There's too much money involved in the game, and that is why we're seeing 48 teams, and we're forgetting about the football fans as well. I remember jumping on a plane in New York in 1994. And it was LaGuardia, and there was a flight to Dallas, and before the flight I met Michel Platini, who was running the rule over the 94 World Cup, because the 98 World Cup was going to be held in France. And we had a good chat, and I said, well, what do you think? What have you seen? He said, in the States here, he said, I think it's just too far for the fans to get to all the games because it's spread out in different parts of the States. He said in France, it will take no more than 2 hours to get anywhere to watch any game by train or whatever. And that's what people are forgetting, I think. They're forgetting about the fans. The players are getting all this money, big money, but the fans are the people who make the game. They ignite the atmosphere into the stadium. And there's far too many games, in my opinion. And that's why everybody's trying to milk it. And, there's too much of a difference between, look, the English Premier League, the money involved there, and the teams who don't have the money, the difference. And I'm not a big fan of too many games. I think you've got to cut down in the games to whet the appetite for the fans and make it easy for them to get to games and support their team. And of course, television's the other thing. And then you talk about VAR, which for me has been totally wrongly used, especially the offside rule. You're getting instances in a game where the guy's big toe is maybe half an inch towards goal and a goal is disallowed. For me, that's awful. We want to encourage goals in the game. And I would say, if you want to make it offside, there's got to be a difference. If there's one body between the first and the sort of last player before you give the offside rule. I don't like the way VAR has been used, the way it's stopped, and people, when you slow things down, things look bad. You see a chap a forward getting past a defender, not towards goals. He's going away from goal. Defender goes for the ball, and he catches him very marginally. But when it's slowed down, it's a penalty kick. Referees in the old days used their common sense, and I think we need more common sense in the game nowadays. I don't like the way games have been refereed by television. I think it's good in certain instances, the ball over the line and other things, but I think there's got to be a lot of changes in VAR, Tim.
How about Scotland specifically? Will we ever see them raise the European Championship Cup at some point? I mean, and it's
short answer, no.
Sadly. Well, no.
We always go away with another glorious failure.
Well, I also look to it. This is sort of another sort of. I always look at the Scottish game as being. I mean, you mentioned some of those, the firm and the old derbies and all that stuff, but it also feels marginalized when you look at the Premier League, right? And what about a British league where you can bring in some of the better teams from? I don't know. It just feels like that Scotland is. There
should have been a British league. There should have been a British league
so.
a long time ago, and Rangers and Celtic should have been invited into it. Whether or not they go straight into the top division or they have to work their way up is another matter. But that would also give the other clubs in Scotland a chance to get into Europe and make money. But it seems to me that the EPL, they don't want to share the money. They don't want to share the wealth with other clubs, and they don't want to. And I think we should have a British league. And as I said, there's too much money in the game. You've got to admire Manchester City, how well they play under Pep Guardiola. But, I mean, you look at the team, they've got two teams, and you look at the amount of money they've spent and how much the Arab world has put into the game, which for me is devaluing football. Football should always be a passionate game, and it should, to the best, be in equal terms for both teams. But such a difference with the money. And you look at the Scottish clubs, Celtic and Rangers, they're playing in Europe, and you look at some of the teams they're playing against and the money they've got and the players they've got in their team. It's not a level playing field now. And I think money has obviously ruined the game to a large extent, and there's far too many games. I agree with you, far too many games.
All right, a thoroughly enjoyable conversation. Our thanks to Derek for having it and staying up late or getting up early. I forget which it was, all the way from Thailand. And the book is chock full of great stories, anecdotes, remembrances, celebrities, famous teams, and all that kind of stuff from his playing days and then some. It is called When Jesus Came to Hong Kong, the remarkable story of the first European football star in Asia. It is published by our friends at Blacksmith Books, and it is available now wherever you find good books. The best and easiest and quickest way to get it is through our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search up this episode number 331 with Derek Currie, and you will find a convenient link that will take you to Amazon, and you will get it as quickly as you can humanly get it. And I highly encourage you to do so. You will love it, as I did. Pele makes an appearance. Marvin Hagler is in there. Stevie Wonder shows up. And yes, the San Antonio Thunder are discussed, as we talked about in our chat. And on our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, when you find that episode, you will find some great pictures that Derek has shared with us. Some from back in the day when he was with San Antonio, the Thunder. Some great shots there, as well as a pristine version of the original San Antonio Thunder jersey that he still has. It's gorgeous. It is truly a work of art, that Thunder uniform. And I think even our friend Pablo Amaro will like that jersey for his collection. It is rare, if there ever was an NASL jersey that was hard to find. And it is colorful and arguably in the top 5 designs of all time from the old NASL, in my humble opinion. While you're on our website, goodseatsstillavailable.com, you can also find all of our episodes. We post them there, of course, if you haven't found them already in your streaming device or your podcast catcher, or whatever you use to ingest our show. It's a great way to kind of sample around and stream and maybe share an episode or two with some of your friends. But the best way, of course, to get our great stuff each and every week is to subscribe or follow us wherever you get podcasts, and rate and review us, will you please? Hopefully nice ones. That helps the algorithm and other people like you find this show, and they'll tell 2 friends, and so on and so on. You can follow us on various socials. You'll find us on X/Twitter at Good Seats Still. You'll find us on Instagram at Good Seats Still Available. You'll find us on Threads at Good Seats Still Available. You'll find us on YouTube at Good Seats Still Available. You'll also find us on Facebook, and you can also send us email if you'd like. We're at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. Thank you to Jerry Payne. Happy New Year to you, sir. Jerry Payne. Audio excellence. It is a brand new year, and we thank you for sticking by with us for yet another one of those. We appreciate that, kind sir. And we, of course, wish you and yours the best start to this 2024. Who knows what's in store? But we hope it's a good year for all of you, and thank you for listening, of course. And we appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Bye.